let's do it. It'll be fine.
That's cool. All right, so going live, but there's always something of a delay. Okay, so now we should in fact be live. Hello, everybody. It's my great pleasure to introduce Moneysocket, which I'll have to admit I know an embarrassingly little amount about, but I have seen these videos popping up on Twitter and a lot of people getting excited about them. And I also, love WebSockets. So I'm really excited to imagine a world of Lightning and WebSockets being put together and the sorts of things which are capable within that world. I shall introduce my guest. How do you want to be introduced?
JD is, I guess, what people call me online.
JD. It's a great pleasure to meet you, and I'm really looking forward to understanding more about Moneysockets. So feel free to take it away and introduce a project.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is great. This Hacksprint's been a good weekend. I've had a lot of good discussions. Maybe not a lot of code, but that's fine. I'll work on code for the rest of the week. But yeah, Moneysocket, it's an open source project that I guess I started just about 6 months ago, sometime very early June. I think that's 6 months. But yeah, it's a protocolization of Lightning Network stuff. So it has a little bit of a backstory, and I think it'd probably be best if I just kind of show like a little bit of a screen share here to show. Actually, does the screen share come through all right? Oh, I'm not hearing you now.
I'm muted. Sorry, I muted myself. Okay. Yeah, that looks nice. As I was saying, that looks like Sparkshot. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So this is a project called Sparkshot that I built prior to Moneysocket. So it's a Lightning Network driven art site. So we spent a better part of 2 years working on it. So some of you are probably familiar with it. But yeah, you have this interface where you select pixels. So artists upload it with their signature. And then you get a Lightning Network invoice. So if you go ahead and purchase it, which I will do very quickly here, it reveals those pixels. So those pixels I purchased have now been revealed. So they're blank space before, and now they're pixels. So this is the app we built. We kind of, with the intention of making a mainstream user accessible app. That was kind of the idea. Like we wanted to get artists involved. People that weren't Bitcoiners, maybe they're excited about art. So that would be a gateway into Bitcoin. But I guess, Lightning Network is still a little bit gnarly tech. It's still early. I think we're just like a little bit ahead of the time. So we didn't get a lot of traction on this, which is fine. I mean, that's part of the game. We're all excited about Bitcoin. Bitcoin's early. But we kind of identified, we try to make this as usable as possible. So there's a lot of features. I'm not going to, get into all of it, but when you do request an invoice, what we saw, so we're displaying these QR codes. And what we saw in our logs is that it took a typical time would be about 20 or 30 seconds to pay one of this. So when somebody sees like a QR code, they got to go dig in their pocket and, whether they got like Breeze or Wallet of Satoshi or whatever else is in their pocket, it actually takes about 20 or 30 seconds for them to actually get to their money and then scan this QR code and pay it. So while the novelty is good, and maybe that these wallets work very good for like buying a coffee type use cases where already you're
I'm with you. I love QR codes. I mean, we use them in Lightning all the time, but at the same time, I absolutely hate them, and they're a very clunky. I prefer
once the
like
novelty
NFC
wears off. Yeah, it's not a bad comparable to like swiping your debit card and punching in a pin or whatever. It's kind of the same magnitude. But here, here's an invoice for 23 Satoshis, which is like a fraction of a cent. All this manual action to actually get that done is a huge pain in the butt. So that's kind of the problem with mobile wallets crossed with Sparkshot. But as you know, there's also like browser extensions like Joule, and then also desktop integration. So the one that I actually paid it with Spark here, which is just a desktop app that it connects to my C Lightning node. So you can kind of like get this transaction. So if you go enter and enter again, it'll throw it to there, and then you got drag over and click. So you can do a round trip in about 3 seconds. So that's a vast improvement, but that's still not ideal. Kind of the ideal that we'd like for apps like Sparkshot, and I guess a whole variety of games and cool stuff that you can imagine that are kind of like Sparkshot, is like as fast as you can select these pixels, you want to be able to settle that transaction. to have a game where the interaction is payments. You're literally like throwing satoshis like you would be throwing pennies at an app. So that kind of became our ideal endpoint, and Moneysocket is what kind of working backwards from that ideal. That's how we get to the concept of Moneysocket. So that's the context. Now I do have a very quick demo of Moneysocket. So this is it's less pretty looking. You'll have to overlook that. These are still very rudimentary apps. It's still very early. The Moneysocket itself is a protocol which you can only actually see through the apps. And so I have to kind of build apps at the same time as building the protocol. So obviously I'm spread a little bit thin. My CSS design skills aren't as good as they could be. I'm working on that.
I like it. I like just going with the the 90s web development style. I think it's cool.
yeah, I kind of embraced it. I got some flashing text here and an animated GIF of a moon, but just having a bit of fun with it. But yeah. So these web wallets, they connect back via a WebSocket to a C Lightning node. In this case, it can also do a LND, but for C Lightning, it's running as a plugin, and that plugin is a WebSocket server. And so these wallets, they're running in this browser tab. They have a WebSocket back to that provider, and that provider has sort of an account set up. I have like a very basic sort of accounting system where you create an account and assign a certain amount of satoshis. So this account has 47,000 sats, and this one has 10,000 sats, and these are actually tethered back to two different C Lightning nodes that are like two different nodes on the actual Lightning network. So you could. This is very comparable to the wallet you already carry around in your pocket. You can create a Bolt 11, you can pay a Bolt 11. That's kind of the idea. But the key feature of these wallets is the fact that it also provides an upstream socket. So in the previous talk with Sphinx Chat, there was the question of like, could we tether this to like Blue Wallet? So there's a bunch of users that already have Blue Wallet. They like Blue Wallet. That's where all their sats are, but they want to use Sphinx Chat, and Sphinx Chat has sort of its own ideas on how to do the back end. Moneysocket is sort of trying to provide that sort of protocol in there such that you have devices that not only have downstream connections, but they have upstream connections that are at parity, that they can do all the same operations. So I'm gonna kind of show what that means. So I'm gonna connect these wallets upstream to this app. So I can copy that beacon, and the beacons are, I guess, a discussion in themselves, which we can maybe get to if we have time. These beacons allow these apps to find each other. So these browser tabs have socket connections between them. So these two wallets, which could represent two different users, are connected to this Moon Money Mover app. And it can then drive payments just with the click of the mouse. So this is going to move 123 sats. When I click it, so you saw the balance changes. It's not animated very well. I'll do it one more time. Buy it again. So these balances update. So what this app is doing via the Moneysocket protocol, it's calling on one socket, hey, give me an invoice, and then it's passing it over to the other socket to say, hey, pay this invoice. So this is kind of a stand-in for what we kind of want to do with Sparkshot and related apps, where it's the app that has the connection. It can issue the instructions to send and receive those sats.
Just to scale it, take it back. I mean, WebSockets. Just for one of our viewers out there, some of our viewers out there who might not even know what a WebSocket is, like, how do you define a web? Because I mean, WebSockets are a relatively new thing for me, and having discovered them, they're incredibly powerful and exciting. But how would you just define a WebSocket?
Yeah, that's a great question. So like the early days of the web, where you had like an Apache web server and you had kind of HTML that looked like this. You would request a website, so you'd send out a request and it would come back, a fractional second later with your content. So that was good. That was like kind of the way the web was done until, I guess maybe the mid 2000s, when, kind of the idea of like, Ajax was the buzzword at the time. Yeah. Kind of, JavaScript that would look a little more like a desktop app where there's cool stuff happening. What a WebSocket is, it's rather than that sort of request response style, it's what we call like a full duplex socket. So it's like it's basically like a telephone between two pieces of software, one of it being the the endpoint of your web browser, and the other one being like the server. So if people are into Bitcoin, like seeing all the price feeds that update in real time, as your candles are moving up and down on TradingView or whatever, that's very likely or almost certainly like a WebSocket connection, where you first load the web page and then you have this additional connection that just sends the updates of like what the Bitcoin price is at this very second. And then that, of course, gets very elaborate. Some of these exchange, casino gambling type interfaces are quite crazy. They have all these like blinking lights and numbers flying over the place. So that's like a data stream coming from the server, and that's probably WebSocket, where you're not refreshing the page, but you're sort of getting updated content.
It's a very hard concept for people. It took me a while to kind of get my head around, because the concept of your computer going and asking for a piece of information in a post request and then getting that information back and then it delivering it to you on your computer, like that's, I know, sort of very physical, but the idea of just this pipe which information can kind of flow between you and a more or less instantly, the speed of light, like I don't know, it's quite hard for people to kind of wrap their heads around that, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, like the internet, when it first started, was a very sketchy thing of all these like, untrusted computers flinging packets at each other. And so like, we kind of expected the internet to be slow.
Yeah.
So kind of that request response was like built in sort of the mindset of we're going to tolerate everything being slow. But then as the internet evolved, we started, demanding, richer content and, audio and video and all these other things. So the internet kind of like in place got re-architected to be a little more real time. And I think history will kind of judge that we're kind of still in a transitionary period between that sort of request response.
Yeah, I think we very much are. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, give it 20 or 30 years. I think, like just what we think of as a web page will be a lot different.
Yeah.
But yeah, to further illustrate the demo of WebSockets, so these do have socket connections between them. So
that's what I wanted you to do. Yeah, that's nice. Look at that. Goodness me.
So this is, of course, just like the most basic thing I could get on screen to kind of demonstrate the concept. But the idea is like if you have $100 in your wallet or some non-trivial amount of value, you don't want to expose all of that to somebody at Sparkshot who could theoretically take all your money, or like if somebody hacked into the JavaScript or something, they could steal your money. So like in the idea of like you don't have to approve payments, the software could potentially run away with it. So then what these web wallets can do is reduce the amount of Satoshis exposed and kind of manage their own permissions. So if a Bolt 11 is requested or provided, the web wallet is a piece of software that's then capable of judging whether we want to go ahead or not, whether it's a compatible amount, or if you wanted to like program it with rules for like Satoshis over time. So if you had an app that was like streaming video, for example, or like, the podcasting type application that you're showing off on Sphinx Chat, all that cool stuff, maybe you'd set up a wallet with like a permission model. Like I only want to spend $10 a month listening to podcasts.
Yeah.
And so
I mean, in that respect, it can kind of work what like a macaroon would on LND. You can give it these caveats. You can, shrink that pipe, the amount of sats which can get through it, I suppose.
Yeah. And it all becomes programmable at this point. So rather than like limiting the permissions to give it a specify in terms of drain rate, you could also specify it in terms of fill rate. So you could just set up a script to just like add a Satoshi every hour to your pot, and that could be running on your like MyNode or LN bits or whatever your backend is. That's just got like some intelligence there that's managing how much is exposed via the socket connection. And then maybe an extension on that is, which is a deep topic in itself. But I do have demos. I don't have it set it up here today. But the idea of like fiat currencies. So there's a few companies that are working on this idea. Notably like Strike. Jack Mahler's what he's doing. The idea that you'd have your fiat balance in an account somewhere, but it would settle via Lightning Network. So it would basically get converted to Satoshis at transaction time, settle the transaction, and then be converted back to fiat currency. So and I have demos in Moneysocket.
I've seen this. I think I saw that on Twitter where you're moving the sats, but the fiat stays the same.
Yes.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah. So like in the same way you can vary the sats here manually, you can program up, something that monitors the price feed. that says, all right, well, let's figure out how many sats are $10, and anytime the exchange rate changes, we'll update the value of sats. So I have that built into the back end. There's code on GitHub that does that. Unfortunately, I don't have that set up here. But now that we've got this stable value, we can also pass with it sort of a marker to say, yeah, here's how many sats it is, but the user understands this to be $10. So when you're actually displaying it on the interface, you can say $10 instead of, however many sats of that.
That's so interesting.
So then when you're doing, this sort of barter interface, this is kind of, intentionally, if you ever played like RPGs where like there's other players in the game and you're going to trade swords for armor or something like that, or like an amount of gold, you start to build interfaces like that where you have two parties coming together and they can, put objects on the table. Here's 100 sats, here's a dime of fiat, here's a sword, and then you'd opt in to, yes, I accept this deal, and then perhaps we could then do sort of an atomic exchange on those goods for those goods and those sats, and in that fiat. And just because we have the socket for that's available. I'm sorry, my phone is buzzing. Because we have this socket available. To basically provide estimates. So before we actually go and do this transaction, if it's like a certain amount of fiat for a certain amount of Satoshis, just as a basic example, before you do the transaction, you could query backwards through the socket to ask all your like custodial providers, or even find out what the network fee might be as in estimate, like you to sort of do like a plot routes to find out how many sats is actually going to take to pay. And you can sort of get a breakdown of like what this will cost. Maybe your custodial provider's taking 0.5%, and then somebody else is taking 1%, and then like it'll take X amount of millisats to route the fee. That can all be kind of put on the table before you actually go ahead and do the transaction. So this is the kind of stuff I've been tinkering with Moneysocket. I'm writing a better wallet. I'm trying to prove out some of these ideas. It's still fairly.
No, I mean that last point is I think that's a vulnerability which we've had with Ellen Bits, is that the idea of someone does a transaction and then like they route it through a node, and they then charge like a large fee for routing it through that node to themselves, and then if you don't charge a fee or a percentage, then by calculating the fee, you can get, I think a lot of people who develop Lightning wallets, they kind of fall down over all the same attacks. And I from what you're saying, the Moneysocket, because you've got this socket of this data stream between you and this other service, would that mean that you can preemptively calculate all that stuff before you actually send the transaction?
Yeah, ideally. I mean, like you don't actually know what the fee will be on the network until it actually settles, but you can like do a plot routes, like the nodes provide that, where they can kind of find a route and you say, the fee will be probably this. And then, you can see it. So you kind of get like an estimate, basically like you do it like a receipt, like when you're buying groceries at the store and you get the long printout, you could essentially, get that receipt somewhere on the interface before you actually do it. And then you get, the actual
something of a guarantee. That it's going to be X amount.
Yeah. But like most users probably won't even care, but just like they like to know that there's not somebody that's like skimming too many sats somewhere in the chain, right? And right now it's not super clear, like when you're using Blue Wallet or Wallet Satoshi, are they overcharging you for fees or stuff like that?
There's a lot of trust there, I think, isn't there?
Yeah.
Whereas,
if you have a wallet like this and you want to drill into it, to find out, okay, give me all the details of it, to actually see what those fees are. I think that would be a good usability add. And in fact, my replacement wallet for this, I called it the Costanza wallet.
I've seen that. I think it's the orange. Is that the orange one?
Yes, the orange one, and that's the joke on Seinfeld of like Costanza's walking around with a big fat wallet that keeps all the receipts because he likes to go through his receipts.
Yeah.
So if we have microtransactions where we're flinging hundreds around, I kind of want a wallet where I can zoom in to actually make sure each of those they all settled, and that's just useful for debugging as I'm building this out.
Yeah,
so that's my Hacksprint project, which I'm making terrible progress on.
Oh, it's impossible. It's the same when you go to actual physical Congress. It's just lots of people, like developers, sitting around trying to work on their projects, but there's too much other stuff to distract them. I mean, like, we struggle enough in our everyday lives to concentrate on our work, let alone when you're surrounded by a bunch of like-minded people who, are producing interesting content like this, and I'm going to have to research Moneysockets, and so there's a repo and everything for this. And
Yeah, it's just github.com/moneysocket. It's a
nice.
bunch of little components. We shipped a Python and a JavaScript library, so that's the piece that you would include in your app. Python and JavaScript is what we have now. But yeah, then there's all the little like the C Lightning plugin to provide the service. I have the stable D, which is like the stabilization daemon that does it's sort of like a middle connection from the terminus to the wallet. It goes in the middle and provides a stabilization function for fiat. What else I got? There's the relay. So like when I'm connecting these tabs, there's kind of a problem in that web browsers can only make outgoing connections. So to connect one from the other, like, there's no listener there. So in this demo, I'm in fact going through a cloud node. There's a cloud listener. It's a relay. So the browsers both connect in, and it rendezvous the two of them. And I have a fairly basic end-to-end encryption. So like when you're generating one of these beacons, it has an encryption key, and when you copy it over, the guy you're trying to connect to has an encryption key. So when they both go to the cloud matches them up, and then they have AES encryption between them, and then the cloud is just facilitating.
I mean, it's a solution which is used time and time again. It's like this idea of like an inconsequential relay. I thought that's how I kind of think of them, that anyone can spin up and run themselves. Which is used just to like coordinate information from one person to another, but it's not storing the information. It's not a trusted third party, and you can have many of these relays. You can run your own relays. I like that model.
Yeah, well, like so it's easy to get going, and it works. I mean, it has the event, like on the demo, I do have the ping time. It's about 100 milliseconds to actually go to the cloud and back to my own laptop.
Wow, that's cool.
But if we're talking, so that's a basic example. But like for example, this call right now is probably using WebRTC. So if somebody's not familiar with that tech, it's like a Google tech that they set up for telephony. So their motives is to eliminate third parties, because third parties are latency. If you're trying to do a call, you need it to be high quality. You don't want it to go through a server in California and back.
Sure.
So what WebRTC does is when you connect to it initially, it plots a route between the participants and sets up a peer-to-peer connection. So here it's probably like, between my browser tab and yours, we're sending this video stream, and there's nobody that's snooping in it. I mean, some companies probably do. That's their monetization strategy. But but the tech exists to do like peer-to-peer telephony without that server.
Cool.
So in the world where like I want to economically transact with you, and I don't want it to go through a server, tech like WebRTC I think is getting to maturity for something like that. And rather than these WebSocket connections, it's almost like we're doing a phone call from browser tab to browser tab, and then we get ready to go encrypted connection. And then like Bluetooth is another example. If you're in the same room, that's a very peer-to-peer technology. So if I know you've done like hardware projects, and so have I. Where you've got some hardware device, and it kind of sucks to have like a bunch of cloud infrastructure that supports the thing that the is trying
absolutely
to do. So tech like this can hopefully connect in more of a peer-to-peer way to the clients, and then
this is what you said at the beginning about how we're still in that sort of transition period from going from that legacy internet infrastructure to the internet we deserve. Humanity deserves.
Yeah, and like a project like LNURL, while it's great and it like adds a lot of usability, but it's like it's a different use case when I'm looking on here. Like one of the reasons why LNURL isn't really useful to this kind of thing is it kind of does assume that there's a server that you're buying. You're a mobile user. You have a camera on your phone, and you're going to go scan, and there's like a REST server that can catch that call. That's very compatible with like how we see the web today and how existing like payment processors and all that do. So that's probably like an essential step.
Yeah, one of the things I made for LM Bits, I made a milk, which is a faucet milking extension, and it's what I wanted with LNURL withdraw, because I saw LNURL withdraw like a direct debit. You're promising to pay. You can make a faucet, which can pay out X amount per X amount of time. And I thought, well, that's a subscription model. You could use that for money streaming. But then the problem which you have when trying to use LNURL for money streaming is that, well, you get all these requests kind of going back and forth and over SSL, and it all starts running quite slow. And I noticed with the LMilk extension, if it actually milks like an LNURL faucet, which say is giving out 100 sats every couple of seconds, it starts using up a lot of processing power on your computer. Like, it's really inefficient. So when you talk about, I mean, my knowledge is limited, but when you talk about your Moneysocket concept of, paying X amount over time, that's kind of that, except it's the way it should be done, which is where the information could just flow back and forth as opposed to having all these requests. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Like to make a REST request, like I believe like it's got to do a couple handshakes to do it. Back and forth packets, right?
And with LNURL, like if you look at the spec, there's I mean they're necessary, but there's a fair few amount of requests going back and forth between the client and the whatever, the 2 points.
So that's fine if you're doing one transaction, which a lot of the time, if you're buying a coffee or using an ATM or something, it's going to be one transaction. But what Moneysocket, it does like the handshake at first, and then once you've got that up, it's just like sending a message in real time back and forth once you've got that initial setup. So it's good for, if you're doing a session with 20 transactions, because you pay that overhead once and then you're good to go. But yeah, terrible for like just doing one thing. So that's where LNURL might be more appropriate.
That's interesting. So could you imagine the LNURL protocol being expanded to include a WebSocket?
Yeah, that's been discussed. And when I started this out, like I talked to LNURL folks and kind of put these ideas and sort of the ideas. Well, let's look at it and maybe we can make this an LNURL proposal. One actually did get written by Andre from Zebedee. He wrote one. It's a pull request. I think my like it was a perfectly fine thing for I think what his use case was, but yeah, it was still very much in that like client server mindset. And then my ambition was like kind of like I have in the demo to get sort of a peer-to-peer thing set up. So yeah, I'm kind of doing it the hard road to like get it where it needs to be in a few years.
Well, I like what you've done. I mean, you've tried to build something and then you've been limited by the foundations, like the architecture, the libraries which it's built on. So you said, okay, I'm going to abstract those out. I'm going to build the things which I can then use to build things. Which, so you've done exactly what you should do in good development, which you've taken all these things and abstracted them out into little libraries. It's great. It's really good. Could we like include in LNbits? Could we like make an extension like a Moneysocket extension, which is like just to experiment with, so you could like, which would be interoperable with your stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So like right now it's like a C Lightning plugin. So you can manually install it out of the GitHub repo. But like most, if people just want to tinker, that's still a bridge too far. So like, to bundle it with, LNbits or, whatever these MyNode things to have like a tick box, like to go install the plugin and then get an interface to go set up what your account is. I think that's a good step. And yeah, I have checked out LNbits, like checked out the code a little bit, tried to run it to try and see how easy it was. Because it's Python, I think it'll be reasonably straightforward.
Yeah, you said you had a Python library for it.
Yeah, it is written in Python, and I do have like an LND wrapper. LND is a little bit different. There's the gRPC port, so it's like I had to do a little bit of wedge code to support both. So yeah, that's a future task. I think I still need to get the fundamentals of the protocol in. Another idea that's coincidentally you're also involved with is the Nostr thing.
Oh yeah, nice.
Where like it's basically like a Twitter style interface, and it has the signing key, but also perhaps the reason to pay, to do social media interactions like what Sphinx Chat is doing, but kind of in that Twitter web context. So I want to add a feature, because I see it being useful for something like Nostr, is to be able to sign. So when you have one of these web wallets, it has their public-private key that can do Schnorr signatures that are then compatible with that. So if you're sort of walking around and you're using the app on your phone as your main identity, you could then with Moneysocket tether it with various browsers and then be using the same Nostr identity and signing it all through your phone.
Oh, that's weird. That's a cool idea.
I think that's a milestone. Nostr's also a very early project, but I see the value in building apps in that style where you need that service to sign. And perhaps with Moneysocket, we could chain it all the way back to your node. So if you have your node, you could use your actual public key of your node to sign your tweets. And Moneysocket would kind of make that a usable thing.
Yeah, that's about what the Sphinx Chat guys are kind of getting at, that concept of centralizing your data with your own node. you have control of all your data. So yeah, no, it's kind of in that same ethos. It's great, man. It still hurts my head. A WebSocket still hurt my head, I'll be honest. I think mechanically I can just imagine a request, physically imagine it, whereas a WebSocket just... And I guess this is what holds a lot of people back when it comes to developing, new solutions for a new internet. Whereas thankfully there's people like you who can wrap your head around these concepts.
Well, I mean, we're all learning. Like, I'm not a web dev. I've been a back end. I've written C for most of my career. So like getting into web browser and doing CSS, it's like, oh, I feel useless doing this. So that's just like
keep using those tables. It's great.
Whenever you're doing new stuff, like you've never done it before, you got to go Google and check on stats.
That's funny. That's funny. I really like the concept of like a accomplished C developer struggling over a bit of CSS. makes me feel warm inside.
Yeah, well, I don't have to pay myself, so
that's
it's
cool.
cheap.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I honestly can't wait to... I'm going to go have a look at that library, and for myself, I might just try and build like a little extension and play around with it, and see where it goes. But it's great, man. It's great to talk to you. And then, so people for the project, has Moneysocket got like a Twitter handle, or is it best just to follow you?
Yeah, it does. It's Twitter, Moneysocket. That's, but I'm not tweeting through that very much. The main chat is on Telegram. So Telegram, t.me/Moneysocket. I'm monitoring that all the time.
Moneysocket Militia. I'm on that one.
Yep, that'd be a good one to drop in. And yeah, the socket.money page has a set of links to the various repos and all that.
You've got socket.money.
Socket.money.
Good God, well done.
And my relay is relay.socket.money. So that's...
glorious. Yeah, that's nice. All right, it's been an absolute pleasure. I wish I could speak to you for longer, but we've got we ran over with the Sphinx. Everything's kind of running over, but honestly, really fascinating stuff. And I look forward to seeing more of those videos with those Moneysocket wallets on Twitter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your content's nice, man. Like really nice. Like you got a good setup.
Yeah, that's a skill set too in the modern world. You got to be able to get on video and show a demo.
Absolutely,
like
absolutely.
Back to the office anytime soon.
Yeah, it makes a huge impact on a project. What's the word? Propagating through the internet when people can access it through nicely produced content, which you're doing. So I imagine it's I can't wait to see what goes on with it next. I'm going to keep an eye on the repo. And it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on, JD. Thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me.
Cheers, man. Bye.
Yeah, bye.
Oh, and for everyone else, sorry, before JD's gone. For everyone else, make sure you like, subscribe, and all that stuff, because JD's working on this for free, I imagine, and producing some absolutely excellent software, and which really interesting, complicated solutions will be built on at some point. So when you like and subscribe, you're helping get this information out into the world, because someone like JD is building, like I said in the last one, he's building the tools of our liberation. So big props to him. So thanks everyone for tuning in, and share the content, like, subscribe, and all that jazz. Thank you very much. Cheers.